Hi, this is Swapnil Bhartia and welcome to TFI Success Stories. We are running a series on success stories for Linode, and today we have with us Dr. Brian Dennis, Director of Data Engineering at Data Machines Corp. Brian, first of all, it's great to have you on the show.
Great. Really appreciate the time and glad to be here.
Please, can you tell me a bit about the company itself, Data Machines? What is the company all about?
Yeah, Data Machines is a small veteran-owned business in Ashburn, Virginia. Our tagline is that we, tackle mission-critical problems at the knowledge frontier. We can unpack that later if need be. And we do a lot of advanced R&D work with government agencies, focusing on supplying them with infrastructure for their advanced technology projects.
No, I would love to really get into that. You said it's veteran-owned enterprise. So talk about the background of the company itself. And I would also like to understand your role as the director of data engineering. But let's start with the first part.
CEO of the company, Eric Wine, is a veteran. He's Marine, actually served overseas. And he had been working extensively with DARPA on a number of different projects. And the company that he'd been working with, he had decided to move on from, but DARPA decided that they liked what he was doing and wanted more of that. So he established a company about 3 years ago. Him and a partner grew it up to about 15 people, which is the point that I joined in 2018. Again, doing infrastructure deployment, provisioning, procurement, and supplying that to advanced researchers who are working on projects that have been funded throughout the government, and interacting with the program managers and the government offices, and basically providing the service that's needed to take advanced infrastructure, not from the traditional IT sense, but make it available to really demanding customers and researchers. And since then, we've grown the company up to about 45 people, still staying in a sort of a key business area of providing that infrastructure for research and technology projects, but also expanding out a little bit into some commercial efforts and some other parts of the government.
Can you talk about, because when you look at the name of the company, it's Data Machine Corp. So is it all about data analytics, or when you talk about infrastructure, you also talk about, so if you can get into the core business of the company or core functionalities, features, or solutions that you offer?
Yeah, so we sort of do, the core pillars, I would say, of the company are data analytics, data engineering, and some AI and ML. So we actually have advanced experts who work on machine learning algorithms, do a little bit of research there, do some advanced development for applications in the global security community. We have data engineers, somewhat like myself, who are very good at sort of the almost full stack spectrum, almost from machine architecture all the way up to distributed systems and anywhere in between in terms of networking, operating systems, data management, and so on. And then we have some core people who are actually really good at infrastructure, basically, racking and stacking physical hardware in data centers here in Ashburn, Virginia, the data center capital of the world. So that's sort of, I would like to say, that's sort of 3 key pillars. So, data infrastructure, data engineering, and then AI MLs.
What is your role as director of data engineering? How is it unique in its, also you bring a lot of experience also from your previous, so talk about your role.
Yeah, I've been a colleague with many of the people within the company and knew of their work, and I worked with them on some previous projects. And so when they said I have opportunity to come out and work with them, and it's actually pretty close to where I live, which cut down my commute, I said, please sign me up. I do a wide variety of things across the entire company. Again, we're small, and one of our core principles is, full stack. So everybody's in there, going to the data center, working on code, interacting with the customer. So I've done just about everything from literally wiring up bridges to hardware, then going down the street or going into Arlington and talking to a program manager at the very highest levels of the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, and interacting with them about the overall structure of what they're doing. So for me personally, it's a little bit of mentorship, leadership, business development, but a whole lot of technical stuff as well. And basically it really is getting into those mission critical, really hard problems that have these advanced and really demanding customers, and just trying to enable success as much as possible. So essentially do whatever it takes to make sure that the program and the mission is satisfied.
And since you mentioned hard problems, and you talked about helping government agencies or DARPA with their missions. Now, if you look at machine learning in general, we talk about models that are available, we talk about labels, but when you look at a lot of especially in this sector, I was talking to CERN and I was like, hey, why don't you have machine learning or models to find planet things? We don't have any, right? There is nothing to build a model. So if you look at the unique challenges that these agencies pose versus just labeling cat and dog pictures, talk about those challenges. Then we can also get deeper into the work that Data Machine is doing.
Yeah, so for the government, there's a lot of particular domains where there's not a lot of label examples. So if you're one of the commercial entities, you might be able to pull together tens of millions or millions of examples to train on and build extremely large models. That's not true for many, many, many areas of the government. The other aspect is a lot of federal agencies just don't have the same level of compute power as these other commercial entities. So they cannot, go out and grab thousands to tens of thousands of hardware nodes with thousands to tens of thousands of GPUs in them, which are extremely hard to get at this point. So the government agencies just don't have that compute resource to do these large models and do the training for them. So that's some of the key challenges that I'm seeing as well. There's also a level of sophistication. So as you might expect, the government is literally trailing what's going on in industry, commercial industry by a few years, which is a big difference or a huge time gap in sort of the AI ML space. So they're just figuring out, what does AI ML mean for us? What does it enable for our organizations? What's the art of the possible there? And understanding how it can fit into their particular context. So those are some of the key issues in terms of bringing these things into the federal space.
Does it also make it a more challenging because in some of these use cases you cannot just leverage what is already available off the shelf, either labeling or model solutions. So to address that, what unique solution? Also, let's also get into the solution or service part of Data Machines. How do you help these agencies, which will, the problem will help us understand the solution side of Data Machines?
There are two aspects I would say to that. So our customers are typically really advanced research and development organizations. So they're actually trying to push out the boundaries, and they're really the solutions or the requirements just aren't known as of yet. So we're trying to help the program manager, the organization, the researchers figure out, the fundamentals in terms of that. And that's really hard. It's really in the unknown space. So when you turn that back into, say, data engineering or data infrastructure, these are folks who are like really trying to push the envelope, and they're asking you to support them to do that. Now, a lot of times with the federal government, it's with limited budget, it's with short timelines. It's not with the same level of staff that you might have in a commercial organization. So that's a lot of the challenge that Data Machines faces when we're interacting with a advanced R&D team. And so that's why we have folks like me who can go full stack, have a lot of experience, because we can get down to the technical weeds if needed. At the same time, we can interface to those high-level government employees as well. So we can do that full range of things, and they don't have to go to a number of different organizations to pull that all together. We're also relatively small and lean, so we're not expensive. And again, in times of tight budgets, that's really helpful as well. So that's where Data Machines really, really provides a lot of value, is that we have that internal expertise. We have a number of PhDs, master's students, and so on, who are really focused and really technical, and at the same time can interact well with government agencies. And then in the broader scope of things, I think I hit upon that. It's essentially sort of, cost and agility in terms of meeting the government's needs. So again, we work with really, advanced leading edge organizations, so they're somewhat more agile than the rest of the government. But then if you go back to the, sort of the larger agencies or military organizations, they move at a certain pace that may not align very well with technologists. So they have to figure out how to align themselves. The technologists have to figure out how to align themselves with that pace of development, of technology adoption, of risk, of security. Those are a couple other things that are really important. So, for example, one of the reasons we have our own sort of bespoke data center is because often we can't allow data to get out to various entities. So we can't store it on the public cloud because the customer wants to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere or that certain entities have no access to it. So those are a couple of the challenges that we face in the services that we provide.
The last point I was about to ask was that when we do work with government agencies, a lot of compliance issue becomes security, becomes a very big issue. So that also plays a big role. And that brings me to the second question is that how do you ensure that the data that you are working on doesn't leave, either it could be your own premise, your own data center. So can you talk about the infrastructure side of Data Machine? Where are you processing all the data?
So we actually have a small chunk of data center here in Ashburn. It's not extremely large, but it's enough to support the customers that we're contracted to work with. If they need to procure hardware, then they work through us and we deploy that locally. That's probably about 80% of what we do in terms of infrastructure. So we control all of it. We do the security compliance. We make sure that all of the operating system stuff is upgraded on a routine basis. We understand access control. That's another aspect that we provide to many of the organizations. So if they're working with different groups around the country or around the world, we have those auditing mechanisms that can say at a particular time this group was accessing this set of hardware. And so if there are issues in terms of compliance or security and so on, we've got that in-house. We do have, I would say, a growing and significant effort in terms of exploiting and using public cloud resources to augment what we've got. So in the cases where it's relatively reasonable from a security standpoint to provide access to resources to external partners, we do that through whatever is most cost effective, which is most secure, which is most agile for that customer. So, we're obligated because we work for the government to, consider all possible solutions. So we don't pick one particular vendor. We're not tied in, with various relationships and so on to any particular of the cloud providers. Every time we start a new project and we're working with a customer, we really do have to look at the landscape of what's available now, not as opposed to what was available, say, 6 months ago or a year ago to provide that. So we're growing that out. We're getting better at understanding how to bring that in, especially in the area of virtual networks and so on to connect our data center to those public clouds in a safe and secure way.
Let's talk about Linode. In what capacity are you using or leveraging Linode solutions or technologies?
Yes, so for the specific program that I'm supporting, which is a machine learning program looking at how to reduce by a vast order of magnitude the number of label examples needed to get reasonably good models, which means basically machine learning, which means GPUs. We had a short time window in which we needed to procure some equipment, get into our data center, but at the same time, we actually needed to provide some support, some hardware support to researchers around the world to get going on that program. And so we looked to various cloud providers to see if we could actually make those resources available, GPU resources available to them within that window in which we didn't have our equipment. And so we did a survey. We looked at some of the major guys, and it was not within our budget to get the level of equipment that we needed for them. So we looked at some of the smaller providers, and it turned out that Linode had started a GPU program. And in fact, it was the exact GPU cards that we're looking at procuring for our project because the real emphasis there was on the amount of GPU memory on those cards. So that was a great fit. The pricing actually worked out really well in terms of what we needed to do to be able to support the researchers around the world. And so we're using essentially Linode's dedicated GPU servers in a couple of different data centers from Linode around the world, and providing that, making that available almost directly to the researchers so they can sort of log in, grab those GPUs, work on their training, get their data up there, and then eventually they come back into our fold where in our data center we do evaluations with the government and we run their codes.
So I also want to understand how the availability of GPUs through Linode cloud providers, because GPU, number one, there is a massive overhead cost if you really want to buy that card, number one. Number two is, of course, procurement is a big issue to get the cards in time. Maintenance is also a big issue. Plus scalability, if you really want to add 5 more or 10 more GPUs, once again, you have to go back to cycle. So can you talk about how these, initiative by Linode is kind of further democratizing the data or machine learning space where they're putting these capabilities in the hands of data scientists without having to worry about. I mean, anybody can get access to those cards very easily without any overhead cost, and the cost of ownership is also negligible. So talk about that aspect.
Right, right. Yeah, so I agree with you up 80%. One of the challenges with GPUs is they're still somewhat exquisite. So even cloud providers, they have to be fairly careful about access and availability to customers. So for example, many of them will put on initial limits so that either you as a customer don't wind up accessing, say, 40 GPUs, tying them up and not doing anything with them. And you either, essentially provide a denial of service to the provider, or you wind up getting sticker shock from some ridiculous bill that you didn't plan on. So there's a little bit of gating there, but I believe the democratization is coming along, and the fact that yes, they are available. If you can show up and get an account with the provider and meet some initial sort of resource limits, you can get started pretty easily. And then it's the ramp up that gets really challenging. So if you're an initial data science researcher, you want to get, say, 1 or 2 GPUs, there's plenty of places you can do that very easily, very quickly. And then it's that level up when you go to 32, 64, 128, thousands. Then the providers, and rightly so, start asking questions about, well, what are you doing? How can we help you? What's the pricing, and so on. And you're right, there's extreme overhead in terms of if the GPU is sitting idle, I can fairly say you're burning money. So we do it in our data center because we need that flexibility and agility for some things. But if you're a smart data scientist or data engineer or AI ML organization, and you can figure out how to sort of bound your utilization for fixed periods and work within that framework, you can go a long way with public cloud providers like Linode, because they provide relatively straightforward pricing, simple mechanisms for getting started, and then pretty much blanket access to the actual virtual machine, so you can put whatever you need to put on there.
One more thing that advantage that I see with the companies like Linode is that in the cloud, or especially the server world, we talk about cattle versus pets. There we like everything to be cattle, but when we ourselves are customers, we don't like to be called cattle. We don't want to be another ticket. We want to be treated as pets. So when you do deal with a company like Linode, you don't deal with a chat bot. You are talking with somebody who actually knows that. So have you had any such experience, or did that also play a role in choosing Linode?
Yeah, so that we definitely had that experience, and once again, our customers are really, really demanding. So turn it around. We need to get these resources this quickly. So, for example, I could go to my Linode representative and ask them, "What do you have available? Can you let me know when there's going to be new cards available in a data center? Will that data center be in Mumbai versus Newark, New Jersey? Because I have researchers that are in Australia. So if it's in Mumbai, that cuts down their lag and lets them be more productive." And so again, that's the sort of thing where if you put in a ticket or you send an email and it goes to a first level analyst who looks at it and says, "Well, I have to bump that up," that takes a long time. And again, our customers want us to be operating almost at the speed of thought there. And so if we can talk to representative and in one turn get an answer, or even better, get the initial heads up or the indicator that there's going to be more resources available, or maybe sometimes the answer is no. That's still, if we get that within 24 hours, that's better than having to go through a couple of tickets to find out, oh, you couldn't do that. So yes, it's been great working with a company that provides that level of service, not the chatbot, the actual human that you're going to go ask things and have interactions with and iterations with. And especially for our customers, it's been a great boon for what we've been doing. And again, I just want to highlight that this is the leading edge of trying to figure out how to make machine learning work with much less labeled examples. We've got world-class researchers from around the world, 13 different teams. It's just incredible working with them. And I want to say that's sort of the type of thing that really excites me about being with Data Machines. So we have a number of other projects. I can't mention them by name here, but all along those lines. So if there are people out there who see this and are super excited about this, you can look us up on the web and see if there are opportunities for joining us as well.
Now, based on your long experience, not only in this space, but also at Data Machines, plus your experience with Linode, what kind of advice you would give to either data scientists or other researchers or even organizations who are also looking at harvesting the power of cloud-based GPUs, but they are still juggling between, in-house capabilities versus going to cloud-based GPU solutions?
Definitely look around. Be constantly considering and looking at different vendors, trying to come up with a framework that works for you in terms of price, security, flexibility, service, agility, and being able to evaluate them relatively quickly on those axes for you. So if price is your key thing, constantly be looking at what the offerings are from all of the cloud providers. If flexibility is a concern, get an account with all of them, understand when you can add GPUs, when you can't add them. If other services related to what you're doing are really important to you. So if you need a large-scale data management system, if you need a publish-subscribe system, if you need model deployment system, if you need a serverless service to go along with what you're trying to do, understand what that is. And again, if you need tight deadlines, quick responses, heads up on what's available and what's not, understand what the service, the frontline service that can be provided to you. So again, get out and about, get your framework for understanding what's going on, and be constantly revising it. Don't settle on something, then only revisit it every 12 months. You should be looking every quarter to see what's going on in the space and seeing if you can't do better for what you're doing.
Awesome. You almost gave a model how to leverage data GPU. Brian, thank you so much for joining me today to discuss not only Data Machine Story, but also how you're leveraging Linode's GPUs and looking at the work that you're doing. Of course, a lot of things that we cannot talk about, but I would love to talk to you again. So thank you.
Swapnil, it's been great. Appreciate it again and totally enjoyed it.